Over the period January to March 2021, Vulcanus is opposite Jupiter, Saturn, dark moon Lilith, and the Sun, in a trine to Chiron, and square to Mars and Uranus in Aries. Vulcanus and his archetype is especially important for us to consider in the awakening of consciousness and spiritual alchemy involving the galactic zodiac system. Vulcan is the god of fire, volcanoes, deserts, metalworking, and the forge in ancient Roman religion. He is often depicted with a blacksmith's hammer. The Vulcanalia is the annual festival held August 23rd in his honor. His Greek counterpart is Hephaestus, son of Zeus and Hera, sibling of Pallas Athena, Aphrodite, Hermes, and Persephone, who is also known as the goddess Ceres. Ceres was captured by Pluto, but that is for another day. Hera was the queen of the gods in Rome, so Hera and Juno refer to the same deity. Vulcan is identified with Cephalin's myth of hammer and tongs. These are tools of dominance, used to manipulate material resources, to fashion and construct what we know as the industrial machine. During the festival of Vulcanalia, fish or small animals were burned in the place of humans as a sacrifice. This is called karmic substitution, which is an occult practice or attempt to subjugate the natural laws of cause and effect, or cause and consequence. These rituals were created to honor the fire god, Vulcanus. Karmic substitution is one of the issues being confronted right now with the recent transits of the large slow-moving planets through Sagittarius and the recent alignment of Saturn, Jupiter, and Pluto at different stages in the last 12 months with the galactic core, which transmits the will of God. We are all subject to the law of cause and effect. The Vulcanus, Saturn, Mars square suggests that the issue of unresolved karma will explode into consciousness. The fact that Vulcanus is opposite Jupiter, his father complicit in rejecting his son, and square Mars, who had an affair with his wife, Venus, is stirring to say the least. Vulcanus is also opposite Lilith, the archetype for the repressed feminine, and trine Chiron, the healer. This arrangement of planetary bodies and consciousness constructs is no cosmic accident. There is much to unpack from this configuration, operating at this time, but further amplified by the moon's transit of January 17 or 18, 2021, depending on the time zone. Poetically, Vulcanus is given all the attributes of the Greek Hephaestus. In addition to being known as the Roman god of fire and a member of the Council of Gods, Vulcan had the distinction of being the only ugly god. His father, Jupiter, had numerous children outside of his marriage to Juno. When Juno finally decided to have a baby of her own, she produced Vulcan. He was a red-faced and crying baby, so unattractive that the shocked Juno tossed him off Mount Olympus. After a full day and night of falling from the heavens, he landed in the sea. The fallen child broke both of his legs, which left him with a permanent limp. The sea nymphs collected the child and raised him. The talented craftsman had a special love and appreciation for one of the nymphs, so he crafted a stunning pearl necklace as a gift. The nymph was so proud of her necklace that she wore it to a party on Mount Olympus. Juno was amazed by its beauty and insisted on acquiring one for herself. Upon learning that it was her abandoned child Vulcanus, who had crafted the beautiful object, she insisted he return to her. Vulcan was not enthusiastic about returning to the home of the mother who tossed him off a mountain. Instead, he sent a gift to Juno. It was a magical chair made of gold, adorned with jewels. Delighted with her gift, Juno promptly sat down on it, but the chair entrapped her with unbreakable chains. There she sat for 3 days, unable to leave her seat. Finally, Jupiter made a deal with Vulcan to save his wife. He promised his estranged son the beautiful goddess Venus in return for Juno's release. Of course, Venus was brother to Vulcan, who returned to Mount Olympus to claim his stunning bride. Venus was the goddess of beauty, considered the fairest of all the goddesses. Ironically, she ended up married to the ugliest god. Perhaps this is what led her astray, as she was quite unfaithful to Vulcan with various lovers who included Mars, the warrior god. Mars was also a sibling, so when Vulcanus learned of the relationship, he was outraged. He then crafted an unbreakable golden net to trap the adulterers. Once Vulcanus had them caught in the net, he called the other gods to ridicule and embarrass them. However, events did not quite pan out as he hoped. Jupiter was irritated with his son for making such a spectacle of the affair, and the other gods made fun of Vulcan instead. According to the legends, whenever Venus had an affair, Vulcan would get so angry he would erupt through a volcano. When mankind stole the secrets of fire, Jupiter was outraged and called upon the other gods to create a poisonous gift as punishment. It was Vulcan who molded the lovely but foolish Pandora from clay. Upon her marriage to the Titan Epimetheus, she brought a gift from the gods. It was a box with a warning that it was not to be opened. It became known infamously as Pandora's box, as once she opened it, all evil was let loose into the world. Because Vulcan was associated with the destructive powers of fire, his celebration each year fell during the heat of the summer months, when everything was dry and parched, and at higher risk of burning. The Vulcanalia was celebrated with large bonfires. This gave Roman citizens some degree of control over the powers of fire. In 64 CE, an event took place which many perceived was a message from Vulcan. The so-called Great Fire of Rome burned for nearly 6 days. Several of the city's districts were destroyed, and many others damaged irreparably. When the flames finally died down, just 4 of Rome's 14 districts were left untouched by the fire. The Roman concept of fire associates Vulcanus with both the destructive and the fertilizing powers of this element. However, the power of fire is also considered useful if directed against enemies. Archaeologist Andrea Carandini opines that Cacus and Caca were the sons of Vulcan and born of a local divine being or a virgin. Cacus and Caca would represent the metallurgic and the domestic fire, projections of Vulcan and of Vesta. These legends date back to the time of pre-urban Latium. Their meaning is quite clear. At the divine level, Vulcan impregnates a virgin goddess and generates Jupiter, the king of the gods. At the human level, he impregnates a local virgin, perhaps of royal descent, and generates a king. This is interesting because Zeus is often conflated with Jupiter, yet this fable separates the two gods of history. Could Vulcan, the primordial spark of fire, be more prominent in the history of humanity than we realize? This would be consistent with the angry and rejected son theory. How could the ugly god father a legend like Zeus? Having said this, the important thing to remember with allegory, myth, legend, and fable is not necessarily the accuracy or the details, but the messages and the archetypes that can be drawn from them. The first mention of a ritual connection between Vulcan and Vesta is the Leptosternium of 217 BC. Other facts that seem to hint at this connection are the relative proximity of the two sanctuaries and Dionysius of Halicarnassus's testimony that both cults had been introduced to Rome by Titus Tatius to comply with a vow he had made in battle. Vulcanus' energy is strong, aggressive, and brutal. When we think of volcanic eruptions, they are somewhat unpredictable, certainly all-consuming, and unforgiving for humanity. The upward triangle in the glyph represents fire in alchemy, which can assert itself at any time. Perhaps the most notable reference in modern culture to Vulcan is the race of extraterrestrial aliens being named after him in Star Trek. The Vulcan planet had a surface filled with fire, fields of lava, and volcanoes, seemingly in direct reference to the god. The Vulcanite race appeared to have a greenish hue due to their copper-based blood, giving a nod to Vulcan as the god of metals. Additionally, like the Roman god, Star Trek's Vulcans were skilled craftsmen, known for originating technology. In terms of archetypes, in Vulcanus, we have the rejected ugly son who was cast aside and disavowed by his mother, Juno, the queen of the goddesses. Vulcanus was estranged from his powerful family and bloodline. Left to his own devices, he became a skilled craftsman, not only in metallurgy, but in the art of war, deception, bait, and switch. Vulcanus crafted a seat that imprisoned his mother, Juno. He fashioned Pandora from clay, and her name became synonymous with evil and eschatology. He trapped Mars in an unbreakable net following an affair with his wife, and sought to publicly ridicule him. He reacted to Venus' various affairs and indiscretions by erupting. He may also have impregnated the Vestal Virgin, keeper of the flame in the Roman pantheon. Vulcanus was devious and smart. He holds the potential for unrestrained, explosive unpredictability that is part of the human template, particularly when ambitions and desire are thwarted. He was passive-aggressive, dangerous, and manipulative. Vulcanus did not appear to exercise forgiveness, self-awareness, or contrition, and he was the master of his own demise in many respects because he never reconciled his shadow. The alienation from his mother, Juno, father, Jupiter, and family was his unresolved trauma represented by Chiron, with who he is in trine right now. This connection with Chiron is providing a pathway for healing and release from a troubled karmic past. Fire has a destructive and constructive side to it, yet what we see, exemplified and illustrated in the Vulcanus myth, is a tortured genius from a dynasty. Despite his royal blood, Vulcanus operated in the shadows and rarely got the recognition he felt he deserved. His marriage was a sham because Venus was constantly unfaithful. Within the marriage there was a schism which represents emasculation for him, and subjugation for her because Venus was placed into the union obviously against her will. She entered the marriage to please her family and the patriarch Jupiter. If she was happy, she is unlikely to have been unfaithful. So what we have also, with Vulcanus, is shades of dark moon Lilith triggered through the expediency of marriage represented by Juno, used for power and control. Venus was not free to reject the marriage request from her father, who had been boxed into a corner by his son, who had, in turn, trapped his mother in a chain adorned with gold and jewels. Vulcanus, and the connections to Saturn, Lilith, Uranus, the Sun, and Mars, is a powder keg of unresolved issues arising from rejection, alienation, misuse of power, and internecine war. Venus was unhappy, thrust into a marriage that she knew would free her mother from bondage and chains, but would enslave her. This is karmic substitution. Venus sacrificed for her family. There is an opposition between Vulcanus in Cancer, the mother moon, representing emotions, and the sun conjunct Jupiter, the mother and the father of Vulcanus. No, you cannot make this stuff up. The complexity of astrology is beyond anything man could create in his wildest dreams. The history between Vulcanus and Jupiter, Zeus, is not good. So we have an explosive standoff between the deep, destructive, manipulative, dark emotions of Vulcanus in Cancer and the expressive nature of Jupiter. We have a push and pull of emotions meeting the libertarian impulses of Jupiter and Uranus. This is a time for healing reflected in Vulcanus trine Chiron, for moving on, reconciliation, and release. This is the promise of Vulcanus, and we will have to see what takes place. In addition to this, Juno has just entered Ophiuchus, the trine unifier. So we are presented, collectively and individually, with an open opportunity to reconcile the mother moon matrix and the sun mythology of Vulcanus, which is an allegory for unifying the estranged masculine and feminine energies that are at opposites right now, driving a wedge into humanity. The unification of the male-female principle is the third way of reconciliation.